Elden Ring is garbage, but it's also really good. I mean, I love and I hate this game. This game makes me confused, man. I've never been so conflicted over a Souls game. As an avid fan of the Souls series, Elden Ring is possibly in my top 4 or top 3 favorite Souls games. But in terms of actual quality, gameplay, and design, oh man, I would probably argue that Demon Souls is better designed. Aside from Dark Souls 1, no Souls game has pissed me off more. And what exactly do I mean by this? But before we get into it, if you could please consider liking the video and subscribing. It really helps, gives me motivation to make these videos. But yeah, let's get into why I hate and love this game. Hands down, the best quality and my favorite thing about Elden Ring is the expansive environment. Having played all the other Souls games, one of the things that always disappointed me was sort of the inability for the player to truly experience all of the environment. I mean, a lot of what you would see in the background of Souls games is pretty inaccessible, but that's not the case in Elden Ring. Almost everything you see you can access. The environment is just so expansive, the maps are big, vibrant, and they're full of color. I mean, I'll literally never forget stepping into Limgrave for the first time. It definitely did a great job of hooking me into the game. Aside from, that stupid OP-ass dumbass tree sentinel. I also love how many things there are to do aside from the main gameplay, I think they integrated it well into your journey. What I mean is, there's dungeons, there's optional bosses, there's so many areas that you don't have to go to, but if you do, you get rewarded for it. So I think it incentivizes exploration extremely well and lets you dive deep into the world of Elden Ring. It's also incentivized because you don't have to do these things, but it's really beneficial if you do. I remember struggling my ass off against Margit, and then I went and explored and did everything in the first area, and I came back and I was way stronger and it made the fight that much more enjoyable. For example, as mentioned earlier, the dungeons are a nice change of pace and flow to the game. They give you an area that you're guaranteed to find smithing stones in and allow you to level up your weapons. Ultimately, I sort of like how you have to master and explore an area before you can fight the final boss of said area. Now let's get to combat. And honestly, this is where the game starts showing its flaws. First and foremost, the Ashes of War that you can put on weapons is really cool, and I think experimenting with some of them is really enjoyable. I do wish that they added more dynamics to the combat because, there just wasn't that much innovation in this area, or at the very least in the manner in which I would have liked. But before I explain that, we have to get to, hands down, the worst part of this video game, the bosses. First and foremost, half of these bosses are simply duplicates or reskins, so it just makes what's supposed to be an exhilarating experience, it just dulls it down so much, and that's just not what the Souls series is about. But why are bosses so special and important, especially in Souls games? Well, in my opinion, I think there's 3 reasons. 1, bosses provide a feeling of immersion and scale. They often have cutscenes and they give you bits and pieces of information as to what the lore, the story, and they just immerse you in your adventure. An example of this is the Morgott fight.
Willful traitors, all. Thy kind are all of a piece.
Secondly, bosses often act like skill checkpoints. Like regular enemies in any Souls game, bosses slowly get harder and harder and give the player an opportunity to, test how far they've come in terms of skill. They get harder and harder, they differ in their playstyles, they have different strengths and weaknesses. You really have to adapt to bosses, and they make you a better player. In short, bosses are like skill checks for your journey through any of the Souls games, and that's one of the reasons they're so important. The last reason is sort of like the accumulation of the first 2, but it's simply plain fun and enjoyment. Not only do bosses test you, they're creative, they have different strengths and weaknesses, and finding your way around those strengths and weaknesses and adapting your playstyles, honestly, that's a part of the enjoyment, right? Not only that, but cool boss designs, aesthetically pleasing attacks, changing environments, and blood pumping music. I think all these things come together to make a boss fight enjoyable. But one of the most important key factors that contribute to fun, at least in the Souls series, is fairness. When you lose or even get hit in the Souls game, You want to feel like you as the player made a mistake, right? You don't want to feel like the boss didn't give you a fair or realistic chance of being successful. And unfortunately, this is this is the issue with Elden Ring, at least the bosses. Playing Dark Souls 3 and then playing Elden Ring, the bosses are in two completely different tiers or realms. Bosses like Slave Knight Gale, Sister Freed, and Nameless King are legendary because of the challenge that these bosses present to you, but also the fairness that's incorporated into the fight. They each have distinct weaknesses and strengths, and you have to work your way around them to be successful. Not only are these strengths and weaknesses fair, and if you're good enough, exploitable, but they're also distinct. You know, Artorias has different strengths and weaknesses to Gwen, or Pontiff has different strengths and weaknesses to Sister Freed. I can go on and on. In Elden Ring, the story of each boss is not only kind of unfair, but it's just the same thing copied and pasted over and over again. Now, not all of Elden Ring's bosses are messed up, but there's enough of them that are messed up that makes this a serious point of contention. Now, what exactly is my issue with the bosses in this game? How are they not fair? Well, there's a couple of reasons. Number one, the hitboxes in this game are unreasonably humongous. And I don't necessarily mean that they're bad, like some of the hitboxes in Dark Souls 2, for example, but they're just unreasonably big. What is this? How did this hit me? Number two, and this one's big, input recognition. Some of the bosses like Morgott, Melania, and Margit can just perfectly react to you pressing a button, especially healing. Now, I don't really have a problem with bosses reacting to me. Actually, I think it's nice. I think it adds a level of immersion to the fight. However, when you make the input recognition frame perfect, you kind of take away the immersion because it's unrealistic. You can literally walk up to a boss after a laggy move, and the minute you press attack, the boss will cancel their end lag animation and punish you. And this leads into issue number 3, which is arguably the biggest one. Well, definitely the biggest one. The player does not get rewarded for dodging attacks in this game, and you cannot consistently get punishes. Now, I don't fully mind inconsistent punishes, because that kind of mixes up the gameplay and adds a level of flavor to the fight. But Elden Ring executes this terribly, and we can walk through this, right? I can show you what I mean. So when you look at one of the best bosses in the Souls series, Artorias in Dark Souls 1, he's fast, he's powerful, and he's ridiculously agile, which makes it all the more rewarding when you dodge his moves. When you get through a flurry of his attacks, there's end lag on his moves that provide a consistent window in which the player gets rewarded for their dodges and you get allowed to attack. Now, it's not easy because you can get greedy and you can die, and sometimes Artorias can even jump away after the end lag of his moves, which makes this boss tricky and somewhat challenging. And this is the style that's very common in the other Souls series games, which is why they're pretty much all loved. Well, except for maybe Dark Souls 2. Now let's get back to Elden Ring, and we can really use any boss as an example because almost all of them are flawed. But for the sake of argument, let's just take Margit. When you dodge an attack or flurry of attacks from Margit, the player does not get rewarded. At least he doesn't get rewarded consistently. Like many other bosses in this game, Margit can literally cancel his end lag animation and activate a move that kills you for trying to punish him. There are literally times when you dodge a move and the boss is in end lag and you just have to stand there in front of him. It's absurd. You literally have to stand there in front of him because the minute you press a button, the input recognition kicks in and he punishes you. And even if it isn't input recognition, he'll simply react if you're close to him sometimes. And this is the case with many other bosses in this game. So in some of the situations that you're probably seeing on screen right now, what do you do? Well, I'll tell you what you do. You simply run away from most of the bosses in this game and wait till they do one move that is truly punishable. You know, a move that the boss is incapable of canceling the end lag animation of. I'm telling you, after some of the moves that are, at least look to be punishable, you just stand there. Because the minute you press an attack, the boss's stupid input recognition kicks in and they activate a move that hits or kills you. And you can't dodge it either, because you're often stuck in the end lag of your move. You're stuck in the end lag of the punish that you thought you had. You're stuck in the end lag of a move or a punish that the game essentially cheated you out of. So like I said earlier, most bosses you just run away from them until they do one move, or at the very least that's the most effective strategy. Now Melania has this issue, but it's actually not that bad for her, because when she cancels her end lag after you try to punish one of her moves, the next move that she activates is slow enough so the player can actually finish the punish and get out of there before they get hit with Melania's attack. The issue with Melania is more so that she has one or two moves that are virtually unavoidable in specific scenarios, and this is the problem because all of her other moves, at least in my opinion, are rather easy to avoid. So the boss gets very stagnant and is just centralized over dodging two moves, which is never fun in my opinion. But anyway, Melania isn't plagued with this end lag issue as much as most bosses are. Morgott and the Clergy Beast are the worst examples of this issue. I've never seen bosses that cause you to run away and just wait for one move that you can realistically punish. It's so stupid. For most bosses, whether or not you can go in and punish a move and still get out with your life, it's just a roll of the dice. It's pretty much RNG. Like, can I punish this move? If I attack him, will he activate another move and cancel his end lag and kill me? It's ridiculous. When I was playing this game, I was seriously wondering how any of the other Souls games players were going to beat this game in a no-hit run. Like a real no-hit run with no magic or shield, because there are no consistent windows to punish bosses in this game. And if there is, there are very, very few. Off the top of my head right now, there are only a handful of really well-designed bosses in this game. I would say Radagon, sort of, and definitely Godfrey, like the human version of Godfrey. Radagon has some issues, but overall, these bosses actually allow you to weave in and out of moves and attacks, and it turns the battle into an enjoyable duel. You know, you're not just running around waiting to punish one move that's truly punishable, you can actually get in there and box with the boss. And because of this, these bosses are much more fun than a lot of the other ones in this game. So many of the bosses in this game just bait the hell out of you. For example, a lot of these bosses just throw out huge attacks and then they take your potential punish away with a follow-up huge AoE attack. So yeah, the abnormally large hitboxes, the end lag cancels, and the input recognition make these bosses very underwhelming in my opinion. But why? Why are there so many issues with the bosses in this game? Well, in short, it's because of all the new innovations that were added into this game. Spirit Ashes, Ashes of War, some of the OP weapons. The bosses, as well as the enemies, are designed in a way to compensate for all these features. So it feels like the speed of the bosses, some of the abnormally large hitboxes, and the multi-hit combos are designed to be fought against a player who's using Spirit Ashes and certain Ashes of War. So if you're just a traditional Souls player like me, who likes to run in with no summons, shields, or magic, and you don't really use any of the Ashes of War too frequently, well, guess what? You're out of luck, because these bosses are designed to beat player builds who are capable of much more. This is why the hitboxes are so big, right? Like, some of the attacks are literally designed to hit multiple people, you know, you and your summon. Waterfowl Dance is really hard to avoid without Bloodhound Step. And the Elden Beast, some of his magic moves seem to be directly made to be contested with Bloodhound Step and some of the other moves. A lot of the times when you fight bosses, you're going to be asking yourself, am I fighting like normally? Am I supposed to have a better weapon? Am I supposed to be more mobile? Because that's how these enemies feel. Now, I'm not saying this makes the game bad. This is just simply my opinion and my experience with the game. If you use a lot of the things that they added into this game, good for you. Don't let these toxic Souls players tell you how to enjoy your video games, especially this one, because Elden Ring is literally designed for you to use them. It's designed for you to use summons. It's designed for you to use a lot of the Ashes of War. In fact, if this is your first Souls game and you don't really use summons and stuff and you actually beat it, I recommend going back and playing some of the other Souls games, because it will blow your mind how different those bosses feel from the bosses in Elden Ring. In conclusion, it may seem that I hate this game, but I actually really love it, and I don't know why. I didn't even go over everything that I dislike, like how they just reskinned enemies and made them stronger for late game progression. But I don't know, man, like the environment and exploration made the game, it just made that much of an impression on me. It's that good. In terms of enjoyment, I rank Elden Ring as like an 8 out of 10. It ranks slightly lower than Dark Souls 3 on my list of favorite Souls games. With Bloodborne and the PS3 version of Dark Souls 2 being ranked 1 and 2, yes, I love Dark Souls 2. I know everyone hates it, but I absolutely love it. I might make a video on that. But anyway, with my favorites being Bloodborne and the PS3 version of Dark Souls 2, those are my first and second ranked. I would probably rank Dark Souls 3 as third and maybe Elden Ring as fourth. Maybe I'll rank Elden Ring third. I'm not sure. But yeah, I had that much fun with this game. But anyway, if you made it to the end of the video, thank you so much for watching. If you could consider liking the video and subscribing, I would greatly appreciate it. But yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one.